Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm here to present AB 1497, the Legal Justice for Domestic Violence and Human Trafficking Victims Act. This bill ensures that all survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual violence, and other violence can share their victimization stories in court and allow judges to consider these stories when making sentencing decisions. In California, 34% of women experience domestic violence in their lifetimes, and many of these women are caught in years-long cycles of horrific abuse. Additionally, women who are survivors of human trafficking have a shocking 90% chance of being arrested and charged with a crime rather than being rescued from the people trafficking them. Unfortunately, survivors are often arrested and punished simply for protecting themselves or their families' lives. The criminalization and penalization of victims by California's legal system leaves survivors without access to healing or crucial resources like housing, employment, and education. Too often they are blocked from the opportunity to heal because their trauma is used against them, ignored, or not accounted for during legal proceedings. Consequently, judges and juries are left with insufficient information and options when making key decisions about survivors' lives, including when they are delivering criminal charges and sentencing. We must provide the decision makers with all of the information about victims of violence, and this bill does just that. It builds on the success of the 2021 Justice for Survivors Act by allowing courts to consider the experiences of survivors throughout legal proceedings in all cases, not only for nonviolent offenses. Specifically, this bill would allow survivors to utilize an affirmative defense in order to prevent unjust convictions, allow judges and juries to consider an individual's relevant mental health diagnosis and treatment in more cases, prompt judges to consider survivors' experiences when making critical sentencing decisions, and ensure that all survivors have the ability to utilize the vacatur process, which removes arrests or prior convictions from records of victims who survived abuse, coercion, and exploitation. With me today in support, I have Susan Bustamante, an advocate with the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, and April Grayson from Sister Warrior Freedom Coalition. They're both survivors who dedicate their time for advocating on this issue, and also have Kate Walker-Brown from the National Center for Youth Law, who is available for technical questions.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes altogether.
I sit before this committee testifying for AB 1497 after advocating for over 3 years, asking for people to finally see me as a victim and now survivor of human trafficking. I sit here in pain wondering why people like me are still not seen as victims of crime, as whole people worth listening to. Instead, we are criminalized and disregarded. The person who you see before you now, a strong advocate, woman, and survivor, is not what the system has ever seen me as. I am regarded as a predator. I was born in the system. My birth mother was murdered when I was 3. I suffered countless abuse, sexual assaults, and molestations at a very young age. I was adopted at 4.5 into a family that did not need a child, especially not a child with all my trauma. My adopted mother then also dies when I'm 14. My father, who did not want me, put me back in the system within 3 months of my mother's passing. A few months later, I find myself in a mental hospital being arrested for having a sit-out. At 15 years old, I was detained and shuffled back and forth through numerous facilities, ultimately criminalized for not having any parents, and made to suffer in juvenile hall for months. I emancipated at 18. But let's be clear, I was kicked out of the system at 18. And I find myself within months sitting in Sacramento courthouse facing pimping, pandering, kidnapping, and gun charges at the age of 19, sitting next to my 27-year-old trafficker. He was never identified as a trafficker, let alone my trafficker. I was made to be the perpetrator and the mastermind of a crime. Sentenced to 20 years, 8 months. I served 17 years. Never once seen as a victim of crime or human trafficking. Never getting any help or referral to rehabilitative services or programming. I sit before you as a survivor of human trafficking, something that still has not been acknowledged by the state. I sit in front of you speaking on behalf of thousands of women and trans folks who are not present to tell you the countless abuses and horrors that we have faced. I sit before you today in hope for justice. I hope that no other person has to suffer through all these different systems and find themselves sitting across from a judge who should clearly be able to identify a 19-year-old and a 27-year-old trafficker. And I hope that young person, that child, will not have to suffer through 17 years of prison to finally be seen as a victim of human trafficking. I sit before you pleading for you to see survivors and victims and understand that we do not have a look, we do not have a face, we don't all have the same story. We come from different backgrounds, different classes, though a lot of it is rooted in poverty. I ask that you see people for people. This bill, AB 1497, would see people, would see people as survivors, would give survivors an opportunity to be seen as their full, true, whole selves, as sad, as traumatic, as horrible, as shameful as it might be, but they'll be seen. And then the judge and jury will have the full picture to make a decision. I sit in front of you, asking you to see them and to see me. I choose them, and I hope you do too.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Bustamante. I was raised in a Hispanic culture of what happens in the household stays in the household. At the age of 12, my father started molesting me, and it continued to the age of 18. I finally told my brother about the abuse. He said, "Don't worry, sis, I'll take care of it." When he came back, he said, "Go home. He'll never touch you again," and he never did. At 19, I met Stephen, my husband. When I met, I didn't know he was a Vietnam vet or that he was raised in a domestic violence household. The first time he hurt me, my husband dragged me in the bathroom and threw me around. He kept me isolated from my family and only allowed me out of the house twice a year, for Christmas and my birthday. In the 6 years I was married, he threatened to kill my sister and my mom. He said how they would have accidents. It was torturous. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, he literally dragged me through the house. He was constantly hitting me. He would have flashbacks of Vietnam, and I would wake up with him choking me. I have permanent damage in my neck and my head from all the beatings. In 1980, I became pregnant again. He forced me to have an abortion. That was my turning point. I wanted him out of my life, but he threatened to kidnap my daughters if I ever left. So I reached out to my brother once again. And again he told me, "Don't worry, sis, I'll take care of it." The idea that he would kill him never occurred to me. Later he called me to say that Stephen was dead. He threatened to call the police and say I planned it. He blackmailed for Stephen's insurance. I was afraid of having my daughters taken from me, so I was 24 years old. A few years later, my brother died, and somebody who knew him told the detective I killed Stephen. When I went to trial, nothing was allowed about the molestation, nothing about the domestic violence. Anytime I tried to say anything, it was struck from the court record. After a 2-day trial, no chance to tell my story, I was convicted for a murder I did not commit and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. At 32 years old, I had never been in trouble. I was sentenced to die in prison. My daughters were 8 and 11. I missed their weddings, the birth of their children, my grandkids. I lost parents and my sister while in prison for 3 decades. If AB 1497 was law then, I would have been able to share my story. Maybe I would have been able to access affirmative defense or get a different sentence, or maybe it would have turned out the same, but I would have been able to speak my words, to share what happened to me and what happened to my husband. Thankfully, I was granted clemency in 2017, went to the parole board, and came home in 2018. I am a survivor of domestic violence. I'm a survivor of child molestation. I'm a survivor of the California prison system, and I'm an advocate for victims and survivors who should have the chance to tell their stories in court. I'm here in strong support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other in support, name and organization?
Natasha Minsker, Smart Justice California, and strong support.
Thank you.
Emily Harris with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights and strong support. And thank you, April and Susan.
Alice Kessler on behalf of the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. We're a co-sponsor of the bill and urge your support.
Margot George on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association and strong support. Also on behalf of the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, proud co-sponsor of the bill. Thank you.
Danica Rodarmel on behalf of Initiate Justice and support.
Dan Seaman on behalf of Californians for Safety and Justice, co-sponsor of the bill and strong support.
Melissa Cosi on behalf of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, co-sponsor in the bill and strong support, as well as the following organizations. Next door, of course, my phone decides to freeze in the middle of this.
Next Door Solutions to Domestic Violence, Felony Murder Elimination Project, National LGBTQ Institution on Intimate Partner Violence, Communities United for Restorative Justice, Sunita Jain's Anti-Trafficking Initiative, Loyola Law School, Free to Thrive, Freedom from Exploitation, Law Offices of Laurie and Mendez, Prestos Barrios Unidos, Youth Leadership Institute, Kern County Participatory Defense, Last and Family Services, Los Angeles Center for Law and Justice, Pepperdine Restoration and Justice Clinic, Black Women for Wellness, Center for Community Solutions, San Diego Organization Project, as well as the following individuals: Twyla Russell, Lacia Buckner, Randy Elask, Lillian Maes, Seven Larkey, Adia Deweese, and Megan Kakuso. Thank you.
Grace Glazer on behalf of Valor and Strong Support.
Esteban Nunez on behalf of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Social Change and Insight Garden Program, and Strong Support. Thank you.
Carmen Nicole Cox on behalf of ACLU, Cal Action, and Strong Support.
Melinda Kakani, Children's Defense Fund California, and Strong Support.
Joanne Shear on behalf of Felony Murder Elimination Project and very strong support. April and Susan, thank you.
Terry Galvin on behalf of Community Against Sexual Harm and strong support.
Thank you. Are there any in opposition?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Ivy Fitzpatrick. I'm a Managing Deputy District Attorney in Riverside County, California. I'm appearing today in opposition to AB 1497 on behalf of the California DA's Association. First, AB 1497 would undo the important diminished capacity reforms enacted into Penal Code Section 28 following the trial of Dan White for the murders of San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk inside San Francisco City Hall in 1978. AB 1497 should not be used to invalidate Section 28 like AB 124 attempted to do in 2021 and was rightly rejected by the legislature. Expanding the scope of admissibility of diminished capacity to violent general intent crimes is a bridge too far and puts public safety at risk. Secondly, AB 1497 expands the affirmative defense of human trafficking to all crimes, including violent crimes like murder. Again, the legislature recognized the serious public safety implications this kind of undue expansion would carry, which is why the exact same proposal was excised from AB 124 and should not be passed this time around either. This bill, in essence, creates an additional and specific duress defense for all crimes when committed by a member of a vulnerable population. A duress defense generally applies when a person commits a crime as a lesser of two evils. Duress does not traditionally apply to murder. This bill, however, creates a duress defense without any consideration whatsoever applied to the crimes the person committed versus the crimes that were committed against them. It does not define how one might prove or disprove such a defense, and it does not, like I previously stated, exclude murder. Finally, this bill would prohibit a court from imposing consecutive terms for 2 or more felonies or from imposing a term of imprisonment for any sentence enhancement if the person has experienced certain traumatic conditions. But those conditions would not just be at the time of the commission of the offense, but even any time prior to the current offense. By taking this broad brush approach, AB 1497 reduces accountability for offenders and places our communities at risk. I thank the committee for the time.
Thank you. Are there any other in opposition? Anyone else in opposition? Excuse me, bring it back to committee. Ms. Ortega.
Just want to say, I see you and I hear you. This is an important step forward in making sure that we correct the wrongs done in the past, including by this body, for not recognizing you as a 3-year-old and protecting you along the way. So as a member of the State of California's Public Safety Committee, I want to say I'm sorry. And once again say, I see you and I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry I missed the presentation, but I know this bill inside and out because I know April Grayson inside and out. I had the privilege of seeing a film that was made about her life called Little April. But the entire premise of the film is how this legislature cut her out of her own bill, a bill that would have given her voice and agency in the courtroom. This is an attempt to right that injustice. Thank you for your courage in coming here today and for sitting before this body again and speaking your truth and bringing that power. I'm a proud co-author of this bill. If there's not a motion, I'd like to make one.
So moved. If you don't mind, let us establish a quorum so we can vote on your bill right now. Go ahead.
Joan Sawyer.
Here.
Alanis.
Here.
Bonta. Bryan. Lackey.
Here.
Ortega. Here. Santiago. Saber.
Quorum present. Motion?
Move the bill.
Second? And any other comments or questions? You may close, Mr. Haney.
I first want to thank April and Susan for their courage and for their sharing their stories today, and thank the members for their comments as well. This is something that will correct an injustice, will allow people's full experiences to be brought to court. I also want to recognize the chair and thank him for his support, and also commit to continue to work on some of the issues that were raised in the committee analysis, and to work on those issues before we move the bill any further beyond today. And thank you again for your partnership and leadership on that. And with that, we'll ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. And it has been difficult, but I also want to thank you for being here so that we don't always get it right. In any legislation, we don't always get it right, but you're giving us an opportunity. And I want to thank you both for that you give us an opportunity to get something right. That's one. Two, as you heard from here, we're sometimes criticized for not hearing victims, so giving us an opportunity to show that we care, that we hear the victims, and that we actually will do everything in our power to make sure we can right a wrong as best we can under the color of law. And so again, I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank the author for working with us. I mean, that's all we ask here at the Public Safety Committee, is for authors to work with us so that we can get the best bill out. And so it's because of that and in other bills that we've let things out, because we've had good authors who understand that we need to work through these things, and we can let things out because good authors are willing to make those commitments. And so I want to thank you, Mr. Haney, for making that commitment going forward. It's a lot of people don't see that. It's a lot of inside baseball, but I think it's now time we probably start letting others know that a lot of things can get done when you work with this committee. And again, I want to thank the victims for being here today to put a face to it. With that, call the roll.
On AB 1497 by Assemblymember Haney, the motion is due pass to the Appropriations Committee. Joan Sawyer.
Aye.
Joan Sawyer, aye. Alanis. Alanis not voting. Bonta. Bryan.
Aye.
Bryan, aye. Lackey. No. Lackey, no. Ortega. Aye. Ortega, aye. Santiago. Saber.
That measure's on call. Needs two more. Thank you. Thank you.